The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
All right, last show of 2023. Get it while you can, but don't worry. The first show of 2024 you won't have to wait long for, because we'll be doing a show New Year's Day morning at 9 o'clock, recapping whatever the hell happens on Sunday at FedEx Field and anything else that's developing with them and other NFL news. And, you know, the calendar doesn't wait for holidays, really, sports calendar anyway. So games go on. New Year's Eve, full slate, including the Commanders. Huge game for the Ravens. Enormous game. They just had an enormous game on Monday. They got another one coming up on Sunday because the winner of their game with the Dolphins is going to have the inside track for home field advantage and also the first round bye as the top seed in the AFC. And we do on Friday's Ravens preview. We'll have Brian Wacker of the Baltimore Sun with us coming up at 10:30, and we'll preview the game where the Ravens are favored by 3.5. And, all the kvetching that they did going into the San Francisco game where they were 5.5-point underdogs. Now they're embracing this underdog role, even though they're the favorites, and they kind of don't know what to do with it. So we'll hear from Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh on that coming up at 10:30. All right, basketball. We're focusing on basketball, but really basketball doesn't get going until after football's over. That's the reality of it. So the college basketball season is really only about a month, right? We got the 3 weeks of the NCAA tournament and maybe some interest leading up to it as to which teams are going to get in. The NBA, it starts on Christmas Day. It just started, but they just got swallowed up by the NFL. So basketball fighting for airtime and headline space and things like that. But we had a game last night for Maryland, and, it was one of those holiday time tune-up kind of games where you play a local team or a quasi-local team. Coppin State from Baltimore came into College Park last night, and they just don't have the size and the depth and all the things that Maryland has as a Big Ten team to be competitive, and they really weren't. They took a lead of 4-0, and then it was pretty much lights out Maryland the rest of the way. Coppin State had only 18 at the half, and they lost the game 75-53. But the big news for Maryland was that they were playing without their best player. Jameer Young was not able to go. And remember, at the UCLA game last week, 1 week ago today, Jameer Young had a career high, I think it was 37 points. He just took over that game, and without him, they wouldn't have been able to hang on to win. Remember, they got off to this big lead, almost blew it, and Jameer Young, as he's been doing all season, put it away at the line. So he did not play last night because of illness, and Jahari Long got his first Maryland start. He's one of these COVID guys who's been around different places, and now is at Maryland. He had been with Kevin Willard before at Seton Hall, but now he's getting his first start for the Terps. He had a career-high 15 points for them, and Willard was asked after the game, when did he know that he was not going to have Jameer Young available for this game?
I think Christmas Day I kind of knew. He was the travel back from LA is tough. The red eye is really is tough, and he had been struggling with a little bit of a cold before we went out there, and his mom called me on Christmas Day and said he's pretty sick. So Christmas Day.
So as for Jahari, how did you feel like he?
The funny thing about it is I had obviously Jameer has been phenomenal. I love Jameer, but I have a lot of confidence in Jahari, and it was a good opportunity for him to kind of step in and see what he can do and take advantage of the opportunity. He's obviously the COVID year was different, and surgery after that, but he's now technically a senior, so he was ready for it.
Yeah, and they were ready for this team. Now, whether they're going to be ready for what's next, we'll get into that in just a moment. But Maryland has been a terrible shooting team all year long. They weren't spectacular last night, but they got a lot of inside points from Julian Reese, who was the Terps' leading scorer with 18 points. He took only 13 shots. He was, though, 0 for 3 from the line. And that's got to be a continuing concern for Maryland. They missed 8 free throws last night. And Reese, their number one inside scorer, if he's not going to hit free throws, that's going to be a big problem for them. He's got to hit right around 60%. And he was 0 for 3 last night. We'll get to what's next for them in a moment. But as a team, they once again shot poorly from 3, 6 of 22. And that's an issue. This kid Kaiser, who's a freshman, supposed to be a big-time three-point shooter, still hasn't really found his stroke. He was 0 for 5 last night, and now the going gets tougher. And what is next is Purdue, and Purdue is the number one team in the country. We'll get Willard's thoughts on that in just a moment. But this was his look at where they are right now as they close out the year and get ready to play Purdue on Tuesday. This season got off to an awful start. They beat Mount St. Mary's in the opening game, kind of a welcome back kind of game where you invite a team that's close by, and they beat them by 15. But then they played in this tournament where they lost, it's early November, they lost to Davidson by 3, and they lost to UAB by 3. Those two teams shouldn't be in the same league with Maryland. They beat them, and then that was followed up by, and that was only 5 days later, they went to Villanova, scored only 40 points in the game. They lost to Villanova 57-40. So now Maryland is 1-3. You have to go way back. It was, I think, over 30 years ago last time they started out 1-3. Then the opponents got a little easier. They blew out UMBC. South Alabama they took care of. They scored 103 on Ryder. Then they actually played 2 conference games because the Big Ten is so big now. You can't get them all in starting in January. So two conference games back-to-back. They lost at Indiana, and they were really never in that. They lost that game by 12. Then they played at home against Penn State and won in overtime. Now, Penn State's probably the worst team in the Big Ten, so that's nothing to get too excited about. And Jameer Young really starting to get going there. He had 28 points in that game. But, I don't think it's any great shakes to beat Penn State at home. Then more tune-up games. Alcorn State, they beat them by 40. They took care of Nicholls State. They had the big win at UCLA last week, but UCLA isn't what UCLA used to be. And then last night taking care of Coppin State. So this is Willard on where they are right now as a basketball team. And, even with the 4 losses, sounds like he's pretty satisfied.
Yeah, obviously we didn't get off to a great start, but didn't really bother me. So I like the fact that, we rebounded really well, took care of business at home, got a road win at UCLA. If we would play that tournament now, I think we'd have a much different result right now than we did the first 2 games of the year. So I think these guys have stayed focused. They haven't lost the fact that, this is a long season. Conference play is really what matters most. And I think they've done a good job of staying focused and understanding that it's a long year.
Yeah, and what's next kicks off that long year, really, the year of 2024, as you have Purdue, the number 1 team in the country. Now, they were knocked out of the NCAA tournament shockingly last year as a 1 seed, getting knocked out by a 16. Fairleigh Dickinson should have no business beating Purdue, but they did. And so now they're back. They're angry, looking to do what Virginia did when they were knocked out as a 1 seed and came back the following year and won the national championship. This is Willard with a little scouting report as to what he's going to see with Purdue coming to College Park Tuesday.
They're a lot different than they were last year. I mean, they have 3 guys coming off the bench that started for them last year. That's unheard of for a team that won the Big Ten. Now they got 3 starters coming off the bench. So the guards are much improved. Obviously, everyone knows about Zach, but I'm really impressed with how much the guards have improved just in a year. The pace that they're playing at is much faster than they've played at in the past. And I think that defensively and rebounding, I think they're a much better team than they were last year. So I think last year, obviously, they were a very good team. I think this year, them being the number 1 ranked team in the country is well deserved. Yeah,
well, we'll find out more about them when they get in Tuesday. The big thing for Maryland is you got to make sure Jameer Young is 100%. He was on the bench, which is kind of curious for a guy who's been sick. I mean, do you want him interfacing with your other players. Maybe he's over the illness and maybe he's just weak. I don't know. And maybe because it was Coppin State last night that you didn't need him to win, but he didn't play. And it means that if he's able to take the court next Tuesday, it'll be 10 full days before they had a game, or a game that he played in. Remember, it was a week ago tonight that they beat UCLA, and last night was one of those games just to kind of keep him fresh heading into the conference season. So Willard said he'd like to get him back at practice maybe Sunday, and then Tuesday would be the game, and he's got to have a huge performance. That's going to be the story of the year. I mean, he's got to have big scoring nights almost any game just to keep him in it. And Julian Reese, who's been good against lesser opponents, has got to find a way to score. I mean, that's, Zach Edey is going to be a real chore for him on Tuesday, and he's got to hit free throws. You can't be going to the line and going 0 for 3, and he's had some miserable performances this year. He's going to get fouled when he goes inside, and he's got to hit shots from the line, which he has not been able to do. All right, some NBA from last night, and I was talking to Steve Buckhantz on the air yesterday, longtime voice of the Wizards, about what it's like to do a really bad team, and he did some bad teams over the years, but nothing like the Detroit Pistons, who now have tied the NBA record, not the season record, but the all-time NBA record for most consecutive losses, which was set by the Philadelphia 76ers under, by the way, the ownership of Josh Harris, the Trust the Process Sixers, who did this, 8-9 years ago, and lost over the course of 2 seasons, 28 straight. The Pistons have done this in 1 season. The thing is, they played the best team in the league on the road last night. They went up by 21 points, and they lost in overtime, 128-122. At some point, Boston must have said to themselves, oh, my God, we can't be the team that the streak ends against. We got to find a way to win this game, which they did. So I'm sure a big sigh of relief from the Celtics last night after they were able to hang on and win in overtime, 128-122. Next game for Detroit is going to be at home against Toronto on Saturday, tomorrow. And they will try to avoid what would be the longest streak in NBA history. No team, even over the course of 2 years, has ever lost 29 straight. They would have lost 29 straight if they do that, which is just absolutely incredible. It's almost hard to do, because what happens in the NBA, it's kind of like baseball. Best team loses to worst team every now and then. And probably Boston, sitting on top of the division and top of the league, for that matter. Now they have the top record in the league at 24-6. Yeah, I mean it's easy to overlook this team, and a team that's probably hungry not to have their names in the record books, but now they have it, tying the record with 28 consecutive losses, and already now owning the season record for most consecutive losses. It's at 28 and counting. Meantime, on the other side, you had Nikola Jokic of the defending champion Denver Nuggets playing the Memphis Grizzlies in a complete blowout, 142-105. He was literally perfect. He had a triple-double. He was 11 of 11 from the field, hit his only three-pointer, 3 of 3 from the line. He also had 10 assists. So 24 points, 14 rebounds, 10 assists. It's his third career triple-double on 100% field goal percentage, matching Wilt Chamberlain for most of all time. Now, Wilt's free throws are not included in that, because Wilt could hit free throws, but from the field, and Wilt was usually dunking, so he was hitting high percentage shots. But Jokic, wow, 11 of 11, and perfect from the line, 3 of 3. It's the 116th regular season triple-double of his career, ranks 4th all-time in NBA history, 22 behind Magic Johnson for 3rd. Russell Westbrook at 198 is tops, and Oscar Robertson is number 2 at 181. I believe Westbrook he did. He broke Oscar's record when he was playing here. So there's that. And then this from the NBA. You know that the Miami Heat, you probably heard this, have decided to retire the number of an incredible story in NBA history. Udonis Haslem has spent like the last 10 years not playing for Miami. They have felt that it was good for them to have him in the locker room, have him available for practice. He'd play in 6 or 7 games a year, but he was a player they felt was worthwhile keeping around, even though he could really never play. And he did manage to spend 20 seasons with the Miami Heat, so they're going to retire his number 40, the 6th number to hang in the rafters, joining Alonzo Mourning, Tim Hardaway, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, and Shaquille O'Neal. And they also have hanging Bill Russell's number 6 and Michael Jordan's number 23. Now, this is a league thing on Russell. When he passed away, the league agreed to retire his number. I could see kind of both sides of that. He was obviously a very important figure in the history of not just the NBA, but of sports, becoming the first African-American coach in major professional sports when he was a player coach with the Boston Celtics and one of the great players of all time, certainly the greatest winner of all time, played 13 years in the NBA, won 11 championships. So, okay, that's a league thing. They're retiring his number. But Michael Jordan? Really? I mean, why Michael Jordan? All Michael Jordan did was prevent Miami from winning more championships. And Shaquille O'Neal said last night, whose number is retired, he says, I hate the fact that they hang other people's jerseys. I hope I'm not disrespecting anybody by this term. This thing is ours. This is what we built. Michael Jordan ain't never play for the Heat. Bill Russell ain't never play for the Heat. You did your own thing with your little Celtics family and Chicago family, O'Neal said. But this Miami thing, I was one of the original championship families. This is our thing, so I don't like that personally. I would certainly agree with him strongly on Jordan and could be convinced on Russell. It just seems to me that numbers should be retired for teams. Now, maybe Jackie Robinson would be the exception on that, given his historical significance, not just in baseball, but in society, the importance of Jackie Robinson and to be remembered, and that his number does hang or is posted on outfields throughout Major League Baseball where younger people who don't know much about him can ask. I think that's important. But Michael Jordan? No. Michael Jordan was a great player. I don't think, and I think when you retire a number for, not for your own team, but for other teams around the league, I think it's the cultural significance of it, the historical significance. And there really wasn't, except that Michael Jordan is the greatest player ever lived. But I think, obviously the Bulls are going to retire number 23. But I wouldn't do it. I would, you want the Wizards to retire 23, really? Because the 23 who was here wasn't the 23 that was in Chicago. So, I tend to side with Shaq on that. I think he's on it right there. Mike Singletary, one of the many interviews that has popped up on YouTube, done with Joe Buck a few years ago. I went through it yesterday and pulled out a couple of incredible stories. He's not only an incredible story, but he's an incredible storyteller. And we'll get to those stories from Mike Singletary as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Ravens preview coming up at 10:30. Ravens and the Dolphins on Sunday in Baltimore. Coverage here starting at 12:30 Sunday afternoon. Also 11 o'clock. Tony Kornheiser with his last show of 2023, but like me, Tony will be doing a show on Monday. So we end the year and kick off the year starting on Monday. Anyway, I've been talking last week or so about these YouTube videos that have surfaced of interviews that Joe Buck did 4, 5, 6 years ago. They're an hour apiece. And if you go through it, you can come up with some great stories, which I have pulled out for your listening pleasure. And Mike Singletary was one of the conversations, Hall of Famer, the leader of that 85 Bears defense, which is the best I've ever seen. Some might argue the 2000 Ravens, maybe there's another team that you thought had a great defense. But to me, that was a team that beat you before they got on the field, and they beat you by intimidating you with that defense. And the leader of that was Mike Singletary. But as we've been hearing in these conversations, the what-ifs on all these guys, on almost all of them, is amazing. And, what if Mike Singletary doesn't somehow convince his father that he should play football? And that's, as you'll hear, that's going to be a lot tougher than you might think. The fact that Mike Singletary got on the football field at all, number one, is amazing. And maybe even more amazing than that, as he told Joe Buck, how he's even on the face of the earth. This is part of the conversation with Mike Singletary and Joe Buck.
Being the last one, my mom was a little up in age, and the doctors really told my mom and dad that she should abort me. I was going to be sickly and may have some other issues that it would just be better to do away with that. But for my mom and my dad, that was out of the question. We're going to have this child, and we're going to trust God to do what we know that he can do to bring our son up and make him healthy. And so that was the scenario. And my dad was a Pentecostal pastor, and my mom worked a little bit here and there doing odd jobs. My dad was the go-to guy in our neighborhood. He was the guy that everybody came to when there was an issue. If someone needed help, they came to my dad. If someone needed something done to their home, they came to my dad. If someone was sick, they came to my dad to pray for whoever it was. So my dad was everything to the neighborhood. But at the same time, he was not that to our home. And his own family suffered. The problem is that my dad didn't, he was always giving out money. He got in trouble with taxes at times. So, and he gave a lot of money to the church. So it was one of those things, once again, that he gave to everybody else, but we struggled.
I would imagine, that this was not a table filled with food when you were a kid.
Well, here's the interesting. There would be times that were more difficult than others. But my dad was the provider. My dad, the one thing that I learned from my father was you have to work. So my dad was in the construction business and very good at what he did. And all of us boys worked together in this construction business. And we did driveways and foundations and sidewalks and things like that. And sometimes, he didn't have work. And we would have to go out and find some. We'd pick up cans. We'd go to the junkyard and figure out there would be things lying around. We'd get all the copper and whatever we could find and go and take it to the metal place. And whatever we had to do, we did that. He always taught us you have to be willing to do the work. If there's a will, there's a way. I believe that, and it's one of the greatest attributes that I have.
I know there was a strict household. I know he ruled that household when he was there to the point where you guys really weren't allowed to wear shorts, weren't allowed to play sports.
All of my sisters and brothers flunked gym because you couldn't participate, because any type of athletics or anything like that was seen as something that you could become prideful, or something that took away from your devotion to God. There were so many different rules. You couldn't dance. You couldn't. There was a lot of things that you couldn't do. So
this was like the movie Footloose before Footloose.
Yeah, I guess so.
You couldn't dance in the town.
Yeah,
you couldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's a lot for a kid. I talked to your sister though, Linda. Your brother Grady, at some point here, steps in, and from what I gather, really becomes a mentor, a father figure to you. He was the one that filled that void early for you.
Grady was the next brother to me in the family line. And I was very close to Grady. When my mom and dad divorced, Grady moved back home. And he was trying to help mom with me. And my mom worked 22, 23 hours a day at this hotel. My job was to basically go to school, learn everything I could, and just stay out of trouble. That was my job, and that was very frustrating for me because I wanted to do something more than that. I wanted to contribute. I wanted to get a job, and Mom said, I'm not going to have that.
And while this is all going on, you're kind of sneaking your way over to the TV to watch football.
Well, there were a couple of kids in the neighborhood. We would go on the back street and play football. I was not supposed to play. But I would just go and hang out with the guys and play the game. We would play tackle on the grass, touch on the street. That was.
I bet you enjoy the game on the grass more. just knowing how this story ends.
Yeah,
I would imagine you like the tackle part a little better.
It was fun. I mean, I loved the game. It was a great escape. Gave me a great opportunity to get away and just let whatever I had in me out.
Vent.
Yes. So it was a lot of fun.
So let's recap here. Mike Singletary, Hall of Fame linebacker, youngest of 10 kids. His parents are advised to abort the baby. They refuse. Baby's born. He's born into a family where the father forbids the kids to play sports. Okay. Older brothers and sisters flunking gym. They couldn't even participate in school in sports. And Singletary's able to sneak off and play football. And there's another part of the conversation where the brother, Grady, who's later killed in a car accident, kind of steps up for him and stands up to the dad and convinces him that he can play. And he gets that opportunity, becomes a great high school player, and goes and plays at Baylor, where he's an All-American. And then it comes time for the NFL draft. He is, I think Mike's the same age I am, so this would be 1980, I think, or 81. It comes time for the draft, and this is what he says happened, knowing that he wanted to go to Chicago. You know, sometimes crazy things happen off of wishes, and it was his desire to go play for the Chicago Bears, and he told Joe Buck why.
I really began to study the linebacker tradition. And, you know, there were two guys that I really loved when I saw them play. Willie Lanier, who played for the Chiefs.
Sure.
And Dick Butkus, who played for the Bears. When I saw the Bears play, I saw snow. I saw them breathing and this stuff coming out of their mouths. It looked really cool, man. I said, wow, this is what I want to do. And so as the draft rolled on, the first round was over. I'm devastated. I'm totally devastated. I go outside. I'm crying. I'm kicking tires. I'm kicking dirt. And I say, Lord, I don't even want to play. You know, that can't be right. That can't be fair. There's no way those other guys are better than me.
At any position.
So finally I say, if you really want me to play, let me go in the second round to the Bears. 5 seconds later, my wife, who was my girlfriend then, came running outside, said, Mike, the Bears just drafted you. I went, whoa, that was fast.
the man's working
fast. 5
fast.
seconds. It was like 5 seconds, you know, and I was like, wow. So I said, oh, Chicago, okay. So it was very exciting, yes.
You show up, you're now playing for Buddy Ryan. Forget the Bears, you're playing for Buddy Ryan. And you show up, and on the first day, he says to you what?
Say, hey, little short, fat guy. Like, are you kidding me? He said, why did we draft you? It was an interesting welcoming, to say the least. He was just a guy that was hard on rookies. You had to do something to earn his respect.
Yeah, I'm wondering, you know, you're checking off all these boxes on your list that you made as a kid in junior high. What's going through your mind? What's your mindset as you show up? Now you're in the NFL and you're a Chicago Bear.
For me, it was all about, what do I do now? Now that I've accomplished the goals up to this point, what do I do now? How do I get there?
How long was the proving time for Buddy Ryan?
It was the first 8 weeks of regular season. Actually, it was 9. I think my first game, and I had begged him all year, I'm working hard and I'm doing everything that I know how to do. It was very frustrating for me. Finally, 8th game of the year, I called my mom and I called my sister. I said, you guys got to come. You guys got to come. I'm getting a chance to start. I'm going to play. It's going to be great. and you got to be here. Well, Buddy sits me down before the game, and he says, okay, you're going to start. Here's what I want you to understand. If you do one thing wrong, one thing, son, if I say something, if I call, you better do it exactly the way I say it. One thing, you're done. You understand? You're going to be right back over there with me. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I got it.
Because they need to know this is a revolutionary defense. This is a defense called the 4-6, the 46 defense. And people in the league offenses, they didn't know where anything was coming from. Guys are moving all over the place. And here you are as a kid, as a rookie, you're the middle linebacker, and you have to be the coach on the field. And he's entrusting this complicated 4-6 defense to you.
First play of the game, Chuck Muncie gets the ball. I hit him. It's a great play. Everybody, our defense is jacked up. We're ready to go. And the next play is getting ready to start, and Buddy sends a play in. I'm looking at the sidelines. He calls the play. It's 2Z. So I get in the huddle, and I call 2Z, 4-3, 2Z. Gary Fensick, who's a Yale graduate, says, no, Mike, it's 3Z. I said, no, it's 2Z. He said, no, Mike, I know it's 3Z. I said, I'm telling you, it's 2Z, and that's what we're doing. Gary says, no, it's not. It's 3Z. I call timeout. Buddy is cursing me left and right. All he's concerned about is I call the timeout because I'm a rookie. So when I get to the sideline, he goes, what are you doing? Are you an idiot? Why did you call timeout? I said, because Gary Fensick was going to call 3Z. He said, go sit on the bench. I didn't play another down that day, and we won the game. So needless to say, I was done. I thought, you know what? I know I'm right. I did exactly what he told me to do. And I sat the game. I sat out the whole game. You know, my sister, my mom, it was a long, long day.
And I'm sure embarrassing.
Oh, very embarrassing. So I didn't say anything to him. I didn't say anything to him all week. We play Kansas City the next week. And he says, all right, you know what? I'm going to give you another chance. They got Joe Delaney. Joe
the
Delaney
late,
was
great
yes,
Joe Delaney.
Yes.
I mean, he was owning the league.
Yes, he was. And
that point.
he was tearing it up. And Buddy said, you better do something this week to contain this guy. You understand that? Yes, sir. Thankfully, I get in the game, and they keep running the same play. They have a favorite play that they're running, and they get a couple of yards on it the first time, but I couldn't believe they were going to do it again. The first time I hit him, he went out, and he came back in, and they ran the play again. And he went out and didn't come back in. So after the game, Buddy tapped me on the leg as I passed him on the bus, and he said, 50, you showed me something. Okay, thank you. But I sat down, and I was on cloud 9. Wow, this is great. So it was the start of something. Buddy sat me down that next day, and he said, look, I believe you got something. And but I want you to make sure you understand this. This is my defense, and you're going to do it the way I want you to do it every time. You understand that? And he had this projector that we took on the road that showed our film on, and he said, you take that projector with you, and I want you to have that projector everywhere you go. He just said, you have to make sure that every day you earn the right to be the middle linebacker on this team.
Could you even describe to somebody like me or somebody watching how difficult it was to get your arms around this complicated system?
For me, it was being able to direct traffic, just being able to make sure that on a particular play, Buddy wouldn't call the play, I would have to call the play. All he would say is whatever they come out in, adjust it to that formation. So it would just be automatic front and coverage, and I needed to know what front and what coverage goes with this defense. He always said, when I call something and we talk about it in here, that's what I want you to do. And if it's not right, you make it right.
That's Mike Singletary with Joe Buck, the incredible story of how he came from the youngest of 10 kids, where the father didn't want him to play sports. Even when he was born, the doctors advised his mother and father to abort the child. Gets all the way to the Chicago Bears, and even as a second-round pick, totally disrespected by Buddy Ryan, but earns Buddy Ryan's trust in an odd way and becomes the leader of that defense. And they go on, of course, to put together, I think, the greatest defense of all time, the '85 Bears. And he talks about this in more detail in the interview. But after they won in '85, Buddy Ryan went to the Philadelphia Eagles. And everybody knew that was going to happen going into the game. And the story goes that Buddy came into the defensive meeting room the night before the game and just said, "You guys have always been my heroes." And he walked out. And they said at that point, we knew the game was going to be won. And I think it was Steve McMichael, who just was nominated for the Hall of Fame, may go in this year, sadly suffering from ALS. But he took a chair and he threw it, and it stuck in the wall. And the players were talking about that. I covered that Super Bowl. They were talking about it after the game. And they were, it was really weird talking to guys like Singletary and Richard Dent, who was the MVP of the game, and McMichael and guys like that. And they were happy that they had won the Super Bowl, but they were upset that they were losing Buddy Ryan. That's how they felt about him, including Singletary. And Singletary says that after Buddy went to Philadelphia, he didn't talk to him for a long time. Like he felt like he was abandoned. He said, "I was very immature, very selfish. I didn't understand it." And he said, "How can Buddy leave right now? We just reached the mountaintop. This is where we're supposed to be." And without Buddy, they couldn't do it. They lost to the Redskins the next 2 years in the playoffs, and that team dissipated. So it's really an intense interview, as you hear. I mean, there's his way of telling stories is kind of like how he played. It kind of hits you in the mouth. And if you're interested, it's about 55 minutes or so. It's up on YouTube, a series of interviews that Joe Buck did. And we'll play some more of it next week. Coming up in the next hour, we'll do Ravens preview. We'll talk to Brian Wilkins of the Baltimore Sun. Brian Wacker is his name. Brian Wacker of the Baltimore Sun. And also hear from John Harbaugh and Mike McDaniel and Lamar Jackson as we do Ravens preview for, well, they just had the biggest game of the year and they just won. Now they got another biggest game of the year, 1 o'clock against the Dolphins. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Here's the thing. Joe freaking Flacco. Joe Flacco on his couch. His name came up when Aaron Rodgers got hurt. The Jets said, no, we're going to go with Zach Wilson. Everything's going to be okay. And they've ultimately had to bring in 2 other quarterbacks. Well, Flacco sat. He played with the Jets last year. Wasn't very good. I can grant you that. But the Browns said, okay, we need to have a quarterback. We're bringing him in. And the last 3 weeks, he's thrown for over 300 yards, which he did again last night in a 37-20 win over the Jets to clinch the first postseason appearance since 2020. Only their third since they came back as an expansion team in 1999. In 95, the original Browns went to Baltimore, became the Ravens. They didn't have a team for 4 years. They got an expansion team in 99. They drafted Tim Couch, number 1 overall. And Couch was a bust, but he wasn't horrible at the beginning. And he actually got the Browns into the playoffs in 2002, the 2002 season. And then they made it back in 2020 again with Baker Mayfield, and now they're back with, of all people, Joe Flacco. And Flacco, again, throwing for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in the win. Talking after the game with Mike Garafolo of the NFL Network.
Man, it just felt like we were able to move the line of scrimmage early on in the game and move the ball down the field, got our run game going early, and got Dave the ball early on and let him break some tackles, and that's what he does best. So, man, we carried that first drive all the way through the first half, and that kind of propelled us.
You and 300 yards for 4 straight games. What's been clicking for you?
Hey, I'm just so fortunate to be on this team. We have a bunch of guys hurt, and we're still a really talented group. Kevin's calling hell of a game every week. So all the credit. As a quarterback, you just get the ball to guys. It's all about them winning and getting us in the right spot. So that's what it is.
Middle of the season, you're home. Next thing you know, you're flying. Coach, your head's practically hitting the top of the plane. You come here, you work out. Now you're taking this team to the playoffs. They're chanting your name. Could you have imagined this?
Not really. I don't think so, especially not in this city. This city's been unbelievable. I can't say enough about it. I mean, you felt it in here tonight. Awesome atmosphere, and really, really exciting to kind of get the job done and make sure we get that spot in the playoffs tonight here in front of this crowd.
Last one, because I know I want to get you home and to bed. I think they caught you nodding off on the sidelines there. You practically did it in your sleep tonight.
I don't know about that. I can't believe that. I'm sure my eyes, who knows. But was it in the second half? I mean, we weren't doing much, and credit to our defense for continuing to battle.
Yeah, he had 296 yards passing in the first half. Now, I've been saying this, and people say, oh, no, it can't happen. It probably won't happen this year, but we're going to have a year where there are going to be 2 street free agents starting at quarterback in the Super Bowl. I don't know if the Browns are good enough to get there, but they're good enough defensively to get there. And if Flacco can keep this up, and I don't know if he can do this, he turns 39 next month. And again, he's been out of football, was out of football for half the season. I don't know if he can do this, but I think it's entirely possible that it could happen. It could happen. You don't know what happens when you get in the playoffs. As good as the Ravens look, Lamar Jackson has not been good in the postseason. Miami's getting banged up. They've got some injuries. Kansas City obviously has a lot of holes. Philadelphia is going to have a tough time getting back. Is Dallas good enough to get there? I mean, you talk about the contending teams. There's nobody really standing out right now. San Francisco was supposed to be that team, but Baltimore blew their doors off on Monday night. So there are teams like this that would be in play, and you think of the Giants with Jeff Hostetler getting there, the Eagles a few years ago with a backup quarterback. It can happen, but those are guys who have been with the team. Joe Flacco has been with the Browns since November the 20th. And that was only because they found out Deshaun Watson wasn't going to be able to play the rest of the year. And how about the irony of that the Browns angered the entire league by giving Deshaun Watson guaranteed money, and Deshaun Watson was the missing piece of a team that was good defensively, and if you had this franchise quarterback, you'd have a chance to get to a Super Bowl, and he's not going to be a factor at all in this. And the money is still due, and they're going to have to play him. I mean, it's let's say Flacco takes him deep into the playoffs and he gets a contract for next year. You going to go into the season with Flacco as 1 and Deshaun Watson 2? No, Watson gets his job back, has to. And maybe they're not even as good with Deshaun Watson. They've been spectacular. It's the Jets last night. I understand that. But nobody expected this from Joe Flacco. And how about the Jets having to look across the field and saying, man, we had this guy last year. If we still had him, we might be in the playoffs right now. He could have been. They went into the season with Zach Wilson as the backup, and you figure Aaron Rodgers is going to play, and they lost him after four plays, and they didn't go out and get a quality backup. They said, we're going to ride with Zach Wilson, and they're ridden out of the playoffs and beaten badly last night by a guy who's kind of a reminder of their past. The college stuff, got the big bowls coming up on Monday, and in the Rose Bowl, you're going to have Alabama playing Michigan. Now, here's the thing about the sign stealing thing with Michigan. It cost the coach almost a year of games. He spended the first 3 games of the year for something else, and then the last 3 for the sign stealing. And what it really has done hasn't hurt the team because they still managed to win the game of the year against Ohio State. But what it has done is it's gotten in the heads of the other team. And Alabama has taken extra precautions to avoid any intrusions by changing the way the players are watching film. And the running back, Jace McClellan, said, we're just trying to secure our stuff. He said the coaches have made adjustments. According to several players, they typically have film on their iPads to take home and watch it on their own. Players no longer are able to do that. you have to watch it in a particular place. McClellan said the team isn't uploading practice film to players' devices, instead keeping it in the main computer system for players to watch with their position groups at the facility. We just have to go to a different location to watch the film, but we're all watching the film as we normally would for a normal game. Yeah, but your routine is off, and boy, football players hate that. Offensive coordinator Tommy Rees would not even answer any questions about it. Jalen Milroe also wouldn't talk about it. He said, I watch film all day. That's something I've done because that was the biggest thing to try and get prepared for all situations in the game. Also, I'm watching the film as much as possible. Really can't speak on that, but for me, I'm preparing as much as possible. So they've accomplished quite a bit with this sign-stealing thing, and it hasn't hurt them at all because without the beloved coach, they won their biggest game. They're the number one seed going into the playoffs. And right now, Alabama's going, they're watching us? What are they doing? What are they doing? What's happening here? Here's Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe, the quarterback for Alabama. Quite a story. Took over this past fall when Bryce Young went to the NFL, number one pick. And got off to a shaky start. Threw 2 interceptions against Texas. Second interception set up at the Alabama 5-yard line for the go-ahead touchdown, and he was benched. But he came back as the starter in Week 4 and has since led Alabama to 10 straight wins, including that unbelievable 4th and 31 pass to beat Auburn, and then the victory over Georgia in the SEC championship. Completed 65% of his passes, 10.4 yards an attempt, 226 yards a game, 23 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 468 yards rushing, and 12 touchdowns. So he's had a heck of a year, and certainly I think will be in the Heisman Trophy candidate conversation for next year. And in the news conference yesterday, dropped this little nugget about his former offensive coordinator.
Was there a moment where someone wanted you to play a different position or something and you kind of said, no, I'm a quarterback?
Shoot, all my life, even when I was in college. Shoot, my own offensive coordinator, Bill O'Brien, told me I shouldn't play quarterback. So, there's a lot of things I can, have motivation on, and that is something I have motivation from.
What was your reaction to Bill O'Brien telling you that you shouldn't play quarterback? Do you remember how you felt when you said that?
How would you feel if I told you suck?
Probably wouldn't like it.
Okay then, so that's exactly how I felt, you know what I'm saying? So biggest thing for me, be true to myself and, stay the same. Nothing changed about me. Only thing that changed me was I had the opportunity and I seized it. And so for me, the biggest thing was just stay true to myself and, I had a bigger purpose than anyone's opinion.
Is there a position he wanted you to play or said you should be this position or that position, or do you just...
He told me a bunch of business I could have switched to, but look where I'm at right now. So, you know what I'm saying? So who gets the last laugh?
Yeah, how about that? I mean, even with all of what we've seen, and we're going to talk more about what Lamar Jackson is doing coming up in Ravens preview, but he's been in the league since 2018, not that long. And when he came out of Louisville, had a great career there, won the Heisman Trophy. There was talk that he should, in fact, Bill Polian, one of the great general managers of all time, Bill Polian said, he's a little small to play quarterback, which he's not. He's 6'3". And there were teams that were looking at him as a wide receiver. And he said, no. He said, I'm not even going to run. Not going to run at the combine because I'm a quarterback. And I'm sticking to that. And he did. He lasted all the way to the last pick of the first round, and Baltimore took him. Even with all the great running quarterbacks we've seen with Michael Vick and others who've come along, and RG3 could have been that guy if things would have worked out differently. They still hesitated to take him. And here's Alabama. You got a coach who's been a head coach in the NFL before, and Bill O'Brien, and looks at him and says, nah, I think you're another position. So good for him. And how that trickled out now is kind of interesting, but you got more media availability for these bowl games. So that came out yesterday from Jalen Milroe. All right, on to the Commanders playing out the string, 12.5-point underdogs on Sunday against San Francisco. Thursday is coordinator day. We used to hear from Jack Del Rio, but Jack Del Rio was fired the day after Thanksgiving. So it's just the offensive coordinator, Eric Bieniemy, speaking about the move to Jacoby Brissett and why it happened, explaining yesterday why the decision was made.
Obviously, we thought it would be good for Sam to hit the reset button, but also understand that Jacoby has earned the right to be placed in this position so he can go out there and earn the right to play. But when it's all said and done with, we just wanted to do what was best for the team moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And that's generally his response to a lot of things. We got to do what's best for this team. This is about, and I was talking about this yesterday, and it's if you listen to a lot of the talk radio on this, you can make a case for either side. One case is, hey, see this thing through. If this season was all about developing Sam Howell, give him the last 2 games. You don't want to win the last 2 games anyway. Put him out there, and he's got 2 tough defenses to play him. The other side is, we got a bunch of guys on this team still trying to win, and how can you look them in the eye and not put your quarterback out there that gives you the best chance to win? This is Bieniemy weighing both sides of the quarterback issue.
You can make an argument for both ways, correct? I think sometimes you got to learn how to play through these moments. But also, too, when you have a veteran who's done a great job of stepping in and has sparked some energy, moving forward, but also causing some excitement, you can't overlook that. So, yes, you don't want to – you want to be very mindful of Sam's confidence level and how he's going to handle this. But also, too, we're in the profession, right? It's a production-driven industry. So Jacoby's done a heck of a job. So now we're going to give Jacoby this opportunity to go out there and show what he can do. And the best thing about that is that those guys are both professionals. They're great friends. And Sam is going to be his biggest supporter. And he's also going to be his biggest fan. So those are the things that excite me about this.
More from Bieniemy, and this was a question about how Sam has performed this year. He's obviously not done well in the last couple of games, clearly regressed. But Bieniemy, throughout the year, a whole season, the opportunity after opportunity to criticize, isn't going to do that. He's going to stay positive with everybody, and this was his overall analysis of the 15 games you watched Hal play this year.
You know what? I thought Sam did a great job. Obviously, the production has not spoken well for itself, but he's done a great job. He's a professional. He's a young kid growing in this industry. And I'll say that sometimes without any bad luck, you wouldn't have any good luck at all. This is going to give him an opportunity to reflect on everything that has taken place so far this season. On top of that, he's going to have an opportunity to watch a veteran like Jacoby work. And I think that's probably one of the best things that he can do. The good thing is that obviously he's healthy, okay? But now he can just sit back and observe, really slow everything down. But not too, he can't slow everything down too much because he always got to be ready, at on any play. But I just think right now it's good for him, but also too, it's a great opportunity for Jacoby moving forward.
Yeah, and he's going to be on display for other teams. As we're talking about Joe Flacco here, the backup quarterback is more valuable than ever in the NFL. And I think Jacoby Brissett's going to make some money next year. Maybe not to be a starter, but he made $8 million to be a backup here this year. He made easily top $10 million next year to go someplace else. Last thing is the homecoming aspect of this. You got 3 guys who've been here, all of them under Dan Snyder. Kyle Shanahan, who's come back with his team before. I think they won 9-0 4 years ago. Remember that game in the rain? And the players for the 49ers did like water slides on the field. There was so much water that they were like you would in the backyard with the water slide. And remember Larry Michael in his last year as voice of the team saying, "Oh man, they're going to remember that." Yeah. Big deal. Shanahan was interested in rolling it up then. He only scored 9 because of the weather, but he wanted to beat Dan Snyder's team badly. I think this is the first, this would be the first game back for Trent Williams because Trent, that was the crazy year that he held out and Bruce Allen decided to embarrass him and, all that stuff. And then he was traded to the 49ers, so he's going to be back for the first time. And Chase Young, who started the year here and is coming back. And this is Bieniemy on the return of Chase to FedEx Field.
When he spoke to the media yesterday, he said he was going to treat it as just another game. What are you expecting to see from him Sunday?
Yeah, Chase, he's going to treat it like we'll see his best effort. I say that, and I haven't had an opportunity to know him as long as everybody else. First of all, I love the kid. I love the energy that he brings. Obviously, he's been a tremendous player. This league is the way it is, and I mean it's the ultimate professional game, and sometimes those things happen. But I expect him to be at his best. That means that we have to be at our best as well. These guys know each other. They've had an opportunity to practice against each other for a number of years. This entire offseason, we've had an opportunity to just work against him. So I expect Chase to be at his best. But I also expect our guys to be at their best also because they're very much aware of what he can do and what a game record he can be as well.
Well, he's been reunited with his college buddy, Nick Bosa. And from what I've seen of him, he does put pressure on the quarterback, but he doesn't wrap up very well. He had his hands a couple of times on Lamar Jackson on Monday and couldn't bring him down. I had no problem with them not extending his contract, not picking up the fifth-year option. And at this point, what they did, they moved on, and it turned out to be a terrible draft pick, number 2 overall, and they got a third-rounder for him when they traded him away. But he just embraced the star culture here. That's what it was. And Ron Rivera, for all this discipline and all the things that he was supposed to bring to the team, he couldn't do anything about it. Chase Young spent his first off season making commercials, and they said, he's checking in with the coaches, everything's fine. And when he came back, they asked him about, spending the offseason making commercials. He says, I was making money, baby. He said, none of y'all would have ducked the money. At the end of the day, it's your job. You feel me? Like y'all just do your job, I do my job. Yes, doing your job you do first, and then you make extra money on the side. And although the off-season workouts were not mandatory, the coaches kept standing behind that. If you're going to be a team leader, if you're going to prove your worth as the number 2 pick in the draft, you got to be there. He wasn't there. He came back for training camp, did participate in mandatory mini camp, talked with Montez Sweat about setting the record for sacks by 2 defensive ends. Didn't come close, got hurt, missed most of the next year, and came back this year and was okay. But I think they made the right move by trading him away. Now, given the state of the Commanders right now and the offensive line, and he's going to be fired up, maybe he will have 2 or 3 sacks on Sunday. But I think with a veteran quarterback like Brissett, he's going to get the ball out a lot faster than Sam Howell. Commanders now 12.5-point underdogs heading into this game.